Hello, John Bloodworth Gentleman Crafter here with a snazzy floating spinner card tutorial. In this one I'm going to show you how to actually design and create it in CanvasWorkspace for PC, so hopefully that will get you more familiar with the software that accompanies your scan and cut. To begin creating the floating spinner card, we're first going to open CanvasWorkspace for PC. We'll close down these little windows that pop up and then we'll maximize the workspace. And then we're going to zoom into the mat. First thing we're going to do is drag a square onto our cutting mat. Then we're going to go to the Edit tab and change its size. We'll first turn off Maintain Aspect Ratio, and then we'll change the width to 270 millimeters and the height to 160 millimeters. And then we're going to change the position to 0x and 0y. So X is left and right, Y is up and down. Then we're going to change the name of that layer to Card, so we can easily identify it later on. We'll lock that layer for now, and we'll come back to it later. Next we're going to create the score lines, so we'll grab the path tool, we'll single click to start the line, then we'll hold down the shift key as we're dragging so we get a perfectly vertical line, and then double click at the end. Again we're going to rename that, and again we're going to change the size because I want it to match the height of the card, so that will be 160. And then I will position the first score line, because there are two, at 67.5 millimeters on the X, left and right, and 0 on the Y, so it's matching the top of the card. Then I'll give it a different color so I can separate it out later on. And then if you are going to use the scoring tool to score the fold lines, you'll set that to draw. Or if you're going to cut dashed cut lines for the fold lines, select this dash pattern that you can see there. Now I'm actually going to use the scoring tool that's available in the embossing kit or available separately. So I'm going to select that in the Layers tab, set it as a solid pattern. Then I'm going to select it again and press Ctrl C and Ctrl V on my keyboard to duplicate that. Then in the Edit tab, I'm going to position it at 135 millimeters on the X axis and 0 on the Y. So that's exactly halfway across. I'll lock those two layers again for now, just so I don't accidentally select them. Then I'm going to bring in another square and change the width to 135 millimeters and the height to 160. So this represents half of the card. Then I'm going to drag in a circle and change the size to 85 millimeters. But because it's a circle, I want to enable the Maintain Aspect Ratio lock. Then I'm going to align that vertically and group them, and then I'm going to position that at 0x and 0y. So I'm basically using that rectangle as a positioning tool for the circle. So what I'll do is go back, press Ctrl Shift G to ungroup them and delete that extra rectangle. Now that I've got the circle in position, I don't need it. I'll rename that as aperture, and then I'll use the up arrow just to move it up slightly so it's about an inch down from the top. That's 25 millimeters if you're not sure. Next I'm going to unlock the main card layer, select it, and then go to the Edit tab and click on Offset. I'm going to set the spacing at 3, the direction to inwards, the corner type to bevel, and leave that last selection as leave as is. Then I'm going to change that colour to something else that's different to the card and the score lines. And what I'm doing here is creating the decorative paper layers. I'll select the aperture, the circle, choose offset. This time change the direction to outward and the corner type to round, and do that. Change that colour to match the smaller rectangle. Then I'm going to go and grab a square again. I'll turn off maintain aspect ratio, set the width to 6 mm and the height to 160. Then I'm going to position that on the x-axis at 64.5 and y at 0. Then I'll press Ctrl C and Ctrl V to duplicate that. This time I'll position it at 132 mm on the x-axis and 0 on the y. Then I'm going to select the main red rectangle and the two thinner shapes that I've just done and hit subtract. That will then punch through those to make them more in line with the sections that they'll be covering. Then I'm going to move the circular shape to the top using the keyboard shortcut you saw on screen. Select the previous layers plus the circle and hit subtract. So that now has paper layers for each of those three sections. I'll call those matte. The aperture I'm going to drag to the bottom so that it cuts first. Then I'll unlock the score lines, select those, the card and the aperture, group them and call that card. Then I'm going to move it within the red dashed cutting area. Otherwise, if we try and send it over now, it will give us an error message. And then I'm going to lock those two layers. I'm going to bring in another circle and change it to 65 mm. Then I'll copy and paste it with Ctrl C and Ctrl V, align them horizontally and just move them to the top. These are going to be the spinner bits that sit within the aperture. So let's call those disco ball. Now, at this point you might want to save this project, so either click Save or Save As. This is just saving it as a CanvasWorkspace project file. What we're then going to do is lock and hide everything that we don't want to send over. So I just want to send the card at this point. So that should be the only thing visible and unlocked. This warning message is just telling me that the stuff that's locked and hidden won't be sent over. That's fine. You'll then choose whichever method you normally do to send this over to your scan and cut machine and cut that from cardstock. Then come back and change this so that just the matte is visible. Export this again using exactly the same method you normally do and cut that from your patterned paper. And then finally the disco ball layer we're going to send over and cut from foiled cardstock. When you have everything cut out, go ahead and stick the decorative layers down as you see here and keep those two disco ball sections separate. Now you've got a valley fold in the middle and a mountain fold to the left, and then when it comes to hanging the disco ball, I'm just using a polyester thread, just something nice thin. You could use fishing line, cotton thread, doesn't really matter, just as long as it's nice and thin. Now I'm going to put a tiny strip of glue down the score lines above and below the aperture, and then I'm going to position that thread and then just spread that glue thinly and downly so it almost encapsulates the thread. If you need to, just add a little bit more, but basically what you're trying to do is get that thread to stick as flat as possible so the card will still fold shut. Leave it to fully cure and then trim off the ends. And then we're ready to hang the disco ball. I'm going to do this by sliding one of the pieces face down underneath the aperture with the card facing right side up. Then I'm going to put glue on the thread itself and then glue all around the back of that disco ball section. And then I'm going to position that, make sure it's central, and then put the other disc on top. And then just take my time to make sure it's all stuck down. Double-sided tape will act quicker, but I find that bookbinding glue gives a stronger hold. Now when it comes to the sentiment, you could cut something with your machine, or as I've done here, just die cut a sentiment with a shadow layer to sit behind that disco ball when the card is folded shut. Again, make sure it's fully stuck. But I think you'll agree it's a very snazzy card. Just the paper and the cardstock doing all the work here. Very little in terms of embellishments. Anyway, I hope you have fun making and creating your own versions.